Good evening, everyone. Thank you for braving the Arctic weather that we're having outside and joining us tonight for our 10th grade parent night. My name is Sherry Howarth, and I am the assistant principal for the class of 27. I'm thrilled to welcome you tonight to this really important presentation from our counseling department. Most schools, even around the country, do not have anything like we are going to present to you tonight, specifically geared towards our sophomore class. We're incredibly fortunate to have a group of counselors who go above and beyond each and every day. So before I turn the mic over, I just want to give out a couple of thanks. First and foremost, to our director of counseling, who is unfortunately home with the flu and couldn't be here this evening. She is Miss Stephanie Smith. To the principal of our building, Dr. Lazovic, for his continued support. And of course, these evenings are not possible without the support of Mr. Colin Berry, who is back there, and I think he might be hiding. So again, thank you. Tonight's presentation will be recorded, and it will be available on the website within the next few days. So I know a lot of you during these presentations are trying to snap photos. You certainly can do that, but it will be available to you if you want to just sit back, relax, and listen. So our counseling team continuously, day in, day out, guides and supports our students as well as all of you. So I encourage you to take advantage of the expertise that they're going to share with you this evening. And later in the presentation, they will open the floor to questions. So feel free to ask questions or to reach out to them personally and ask questions on the side if you don't feel comfortable this evening. So thank you all for being here and partnering with us to help your child succeed. So without further ado, I am going to turn the mic over to our first counselor, Miss Dominique Coviello.
Hello, everyone. Thanks again for coming out on this cold, cold night. It's not that easy. So this is a presentation that we gave to the sophomore class last week in classrooms. And basically, it's just a really nice time for career exploration. That's like kind of the nice thing about sophomore year. We gave like a disclaimer to them. They don't have to have it all figured out right now. This is like a nice time where they can just gather information, get to know themselves, their likes, dislikes, strengths, weaknesses. And it's just a time to just, try to figure that out in plans after high school. And all of us counselors are all here to support them in their journeys, and this is just going to help with that process. So, without further ado, the goals for this meeting, what we're going to discuss today, is review sophomore year programming, introducing our Ridge High School post-secondary website. I'm going to do a little Naviance demonstration and what that is, introduce the Pathways program, review the Career Interest Profiler and what that is, and then a look ahead to junior year. So since it's linked right now, I'm going to take some time to look over our Ridge High School post-secondary website. And what is helpful about this website is it has a lot of helpful information regarding college and career planning. So it's not just college resources, which there are a lot of. It's other career planning, such as trade schools, employment, all these resources. A lot of thought has gone into this website. So take time to look through it. As you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, we have 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. I'm going to click 10th grade, obviously. So here are recommended steps for post-secondary planning. And then we have, like I said, each grade level. So these are general recommended steps, what they can be thinking about in the winter, and the spring, in the fall, in the summer. It doesn't have to go exactly in order. It's just general guidelines of maybe what could I be doing or thinking about. Okay? Such as like the spring, access our college visit page, start considering attending college fairs. So it's just general tips. As you can see, we have a lot of college resources, like the common application. We don't have to go into that right now. But I'm going to click a couple of these tabs to show you what they are. For example, since we're talking about career exploration, college visits and workshops is a great way to start with that, with your child. So here's where like all the information is. So like our annual college fair, that's held every October. We have a full list of attending schools, resources on what to ask a representative when you're talking to them in a college visit. We also have college rep visits at Ridge High School. So this is a great way for accessibility of like talking to a representative from that school without going to the school. It's right at Ridge. They can sign up for these, and they're held in the fall into December, and they're held in the media center. So this is a great way to, you don't have to ask questions, you can just gather information, or, ask questions if you have them. We have specific like senior year college workshop series that, is helpful with completing applications. And this is also really cool. This is career rep visits. So these are also held in the counseling office in our conference room. Students can sign up for these. This is through the Pathways program. Ms. Hughes and Ms. McGivney run it. So we have people from the community come in and talk about their career. So it's a great way to gain exposure for students. We had, what was it? An FBI agent, I think was one of them? Yeah. An FBI agent come in, and he talked about how he actually got to this position, maybe what major he took in college, what's a day in the life of his job. So it's a great way to just, like I said, gain exposure. And then just general visiting college campuses tips. And then events and presentations, like we're all here tonight at one. Here's a list of where you can see them all throughout the year. And like I said, this will be recorded, so this is where they're posted as well, that you can refer back to, okay? And then, what else? We have exploring careers. I think that's relevant. So again, this is where you can find all of the information that we're going to be talking tonight as well, such as entering the workforce, using Naviance, which I'm going to do a little like overview of for career exploration, and how to actually use it. Like I said, our career rep visits, our Somerset County VOTEC program, and then additional resources of, gathering more information about careers. Okay, and then I'm just going to cover just one or two more. It's helpful for, sophomores thinking about the summer or, next year. This is a summer program resource list. So maybe they want to do an internship, do volunteer experience. Here's a whole list that we have as well that Ridge students have already completed, and we just update these to this link, okay? And then that's about it for now. I know it's a lot of information, but overall, it's just take a look at it, take time to look through it. Your child also will benefit from this as well. They'll be using this throughout the rest of their years at Ridge. Back to our presentation. Okay, sophomore year programming. So, sophomores, a lot of them have taken the PSAT in October. It's okay if they haven't. They can also register for that for their junior year. And then in November, December, those results were made available through their own College Board account. Us counselors, we don't have access to that as well, so they'll have their own login to get that information. January, right now, we did the career presentations last week to students. We're doing this presentation tonight. And then also today and tomorrow, we are doing program of studies presentations to students. So that is an overview of the changes, to our programs of studies, any updates, new electives, maybe different prerequisites to get into courses. So this will help them in their scheduling meetings, which is next in February. So we'll be having individual scheduling meetings with students. We'll be inputting their course requests into Genesis. And then that's a time where they can ask questions. We can help guide them in any way. That's when we'll be doing their schedules. So after that meeting, if they want any changes in March and April, they have time to look over those course requests in Genesis, and if they want any changes, they can easily just email us. They don't have to fill out any forms or anything. They can just, let us know what they want by April 2nd. And then towards the end of the year, we'll be doing sophomore check-ins, just to see how they're doing, if they have any questions. So, Naviance. Has anyone heard of Naviance, used Naviance yet? Okay, yeah, all right. If you haven't, that's fine too. So basically what it is a program that as counselors use, students use, you can use it as well. As a note on the bottom, it says, parents, you have your own Naviance, account, and you have your own code, okay? And then students have their separate codes and logins. So you can also explore this program as well. Those codes were sent via an email in January, so if for some reason maybe you didn't get one, you can just let us know. And then in Naviance, this is what we did in the presentations, they were encouraged to complete inventories to just learn more about themselves, which Naviance has. So I'm going to do a quick overview of Naviance. I don't know why Naviance kind of got off, but I'm just going to log in real quick, just to show you a visual of what is offered. So I'm going to go to our fake student we have, called Sarah Student. So when you sign into Naviance, this is what it looks like, okay? So this is the home page. So here are the tabs up top that gets you to each section, okay? So I'm just gonna start with, actually on this left-hand side, it's like, it says welcome to Naviance. Under additional information from your school, this blue link right here, you can click that. And that gets you to our Ridge Counseling website with all those resources that I showed you, as well as a link called Methodize. So this is a free SAT, ACT test prep resource. That's nice, free. So like, you can sign up for this, they can log in, they can take practice tests on it and see what they got wrong. So that's a great resource to use on Naviance. And then under self-discovery, so this is what we did with students last week. We had them take a career interest profiler. So I'm, showing you it right there. There's a lot of other ones that they're encouraged to take, such as Strengths Explorer, Personality, Intelligences. So here's what they took. And so we're gonna go into detail of, later in this presentation, of this career interest profiler. Basically had to answer a lot of questions about themselves, okay? So again, here is all of these where they can access it, and they can also take it again. Then in the careers tab, this is where they can search for different career paths. So when they took this career interest profiler, it gave them a certain amount of personality types that they matched and related careers related to that. So then it's helpful to now search the career tab. Okay, so you can explore specific careers or career clusters and pathways. I'm just going to click clusters and pathways. And this is, general information of bunching it together. Okay, I'm just going to click one for an example. I'm going to click teaching, since we're in a school. Okay, so this is helpful in regards to finding more information about this career that students can look through, such as, the employment outlook, the typical credentials that they would need, how much schooling they will need to take, related occupations to a teacher. I like teaching, but what are related areas, other careers that kind of, match that. Also gives, median salaries, how much education. What I really like about this is related majors. So if I want to be a teacher, what majors could I take in college? So this helps, figure that part out. So I'm just going to click, for example, art teacher education. Once I clicked that, it gave me a whole list of schools that have that degree offered. So that helps narrow down certain colleges. I know we're not making college lists right now, but just so you know that that is available to you, I thought that was pretty cool. And then a plan of study as well. So an example, for this pathway. Okay? So they can also take time to look through all of this. We also have military resources if they want to join a branch of the military as well. We have our own military liaison, Miss Miraview. if your student is interested in doing that as well after high school. Okay? So that's the career tab. I'm not going to go super deep into the college tab, but like I said, whenever you're ready, you can search through this and search for colleges. I'm going to quickly show you. I'm going to click Super Match College Search. You can put in specific criteria, such as location. You want it in a large city, southeast schools. Academics, you can put in specific majors, the admissions. So this helps narrow down schools for students to create like a college list, okay? And then it gives like matches of like what you put in. So I know that this is kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but again, it's here. And then also under the colleges tab, you can search for scholarships and even summer programs. So if I do scholarship search, it's not just for seniors, it's also for other grade levels. You can filter it as well. Oops, how do I get that off? Okay. So this is a helpful way to gain, more information. And then under About Me, that's just everything about that student. It'll have their test scores if they took a standardized test. It'll have their GPA, their resume they can upload, and also surveys that they've taken, such as like that career interest profiler. So overall, this is a great resource. If you ever have questions, just reach out to, your child's counselor as well. We're happy to help. Okay. So, like I've said multiple times, that career interest profiler. So what it really does is it matches the results, matches your personality type to careers that best fit, your personality traits, your strengths. And it's based off of John Holland, and he said that there were 6 personality types. So those are realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, and conventional. When I took this, I scored high more on the social, so like it gave me careers such as like a teacher, counselor, all those different careers that I can help narrow down on. Students may, score high in one area, or they score high in maybe like 3 areas, and they would do well in like different kind of career paths that might, they go together in some way based off of their personality. So the point of this is there's a connection between researching more about yourself and career to help you plan for post-secondary, whatever path that you take. College, military, trade school, employment. Those are all different paths that students can take, which we'll go over, later. But the point of this, like I said, sophomore year, is just to get to know yourself more. Take these inventories, explore, ask questions, and that can help you prepare for after high school. So utilizing these results, so when they got these results, what do I do with it? Obviously, you can look at specific careers, but there's other ways that, you can take advantage of this. For example, you can pursue related extracurricular activities, volunteer opportunities, and academic opportunities. Maybe they score high, like I said, in social, and they, maybe they're interested in teaching. So think about their schedule for next year. Maybe they want to take tomorrow's teachers, for example. And just explore that and figure out if they like it or not before they actually go to college and major in it. They can begin tracking activities and accomplishments in an activity resume. So that's also a helpful guide too, to just create a Google Doc and list all the things that you have been involved in, just so you can remember it throughout the years. And checking out our Ridge High School Counseling website. I think I mentioned it on air, but there's resume samples and resume tips and how to complete a resume. And there's a community service page for related volunteer opportunities. Okay, and Mr. Bienkowski is going to take it from here. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So jumping off careers now that can help them develop their post-secondary pathway. So one is college, so that's your 2-year school or 4-year school. So 2-year school, that's your RVCC. For four-year school, that could be your Rutgers, Kane, Stockton, Montclair, so on and so forth. There's also the military, so that's Army, Navy, Coast Guard, Marines, Air Force. Trade schools, some people might want to be in a trade, whether that's an electrician or a painter, so on and so forth. Take a gap year after high school. Maybe students want to travel or really just think about what they want to do for the rest of their lives. And some students join the workforce right after high school, so there's multiple different pathways for your student once they graduate high school. And next year as juniors, they do have that junior conference to have that more in-depth conversation with their school counselor. Regardless of what post-secondary pathway they want to pursue, the counselors are here to help your student guide their decisions. The Pathways program, as Ms. Covello said, is run by Ms. Hughes and Ms. McGivney in the counseling department. All the information is located on the school counseling website. So when they're seniors, they have the option to either do an internship, go to work, or do early college credit. Career rep visits, as Ms. Covello said, or take place in the counseling office during lunch, and you can sign up on that school counseling website. So that's the program they want to pursue. When they're a senior, they can talk to Ms. McGivney or Ms. Hughes, so that way they can get scheduled for that program. And then next week in the Wellness Day, we have a career panel for sophomores and juniors. So what's next for sophomores? So as Ms. Covello said, we did go over the program studies with the sophomores today, and that's on our academic website as well. On the week of February 10th, they will meet with their school counselor to go over their courses for next year. And after that meeting, they have until April 2nd to make any changes. And then once that window is closed, they have until June to make any changes they might want to make. And then they have that last week of August, first week of September to make any final changes to their courses. In the program studies, there is a page where they can make changes based on that schedule change window, whether that's changing elective or want to make a level change. So when scheduling for junior year, there's something to keep in mind as well. One is reading the program studies. As we said, we did go over the changes from this school year to next school year regarding courses and electives being offered. As rising juniors, they do have more options to take. Teacher recommendations, so they do have the option to see what their teacher recommended for next year in terms of core classes. Of course, recommendations are non-binding, but they should talk to their teacher as to why that recommendation was made if they disagree with that teacher recommendation. Graduation requirements, so there's your core class requirements and your elective requirements. So on one of the first few pages of the program studies, there's the list of what they have to do to graduate Ridge High School. And select classes to explore areas of interest. So they want to study business, are they taking business classes? If they want to be an engineer, are they taking their advanced math and science courses? And we just want to make a note that juniors are required to sit for the NJGPA in March. So that's their standardized test for next year for graduation. Standardized testing. So in October, they have the option to sit for the PSAT. Next year, as juniors, they do have that option as well. On our counseling website, we do have a standardized testing page to help differentiate between the SAT and the ACT. So for the SAT, it's about 2 hours and 14 minutes. There's your English section and your math section, and it's about 1,600. Online, adaptive. ACT, it is a composite score of 36. There's your English, your math, and your science section. Now the ACT said that the science section is now optional. However, we don't know what that's going to be like in terms of colleges, whether they'll accept ACT scores that were science optional. Since it's brand new, so that's going to take a couple years for us to make that determination. It's about 2 hours and 55 minutes. There's an online option and a paper option. If they want to take the ACT at Ridge, we only do the online version. If they want to do the paper and pencil version, they have to find a testing site that does have that option. Ridge is only online. There is an optional writing section as well for the ACT. If they do want to do that, that's an extra 40 minutes on the test, so it's about 3.5 hours. But most colleges don't require the writing section. And so it's just our recommendation that maybe they don't do the writing section, since most colleges don't require it, but they still should look at admission requirements for each college. If your child's still wondering which one to take, SAT or ACT, our recommendation is they take one of each, and based on how they do, then that's the test they should take a few more times before they start applying to colleges. And whenever they sign up for a test, whether it be the SAT or ACT, they should take into consideration their schedule. Do they play sports? Are they studying for AP exams? They want to be aware of their commitments to know when's the best time to take that test. If you want to take the SAT, you sign up on the College Board website. If you want to take the ACT, you sign up on the ACT website. So some of the strategies we gave to sophomores is select activities that are meaningful to you, whether that be clubs, sports, community service. We also reminded the sophomores as well, since they're in U.S. history, that they do have their community service requirement as well that they have to complete, and they should talk to their teacher if they have any questions regarding their community service requirement. Employment opportunities, internships. Maybe they want to work part-time this year or over the summer. And build connections. So we want them to get to know their counselor and their teachers this year, next year, senior year, because those are the people that will help them guide their post-secondary pathways. If your child wants to apply to four-year school, it helps when they get to know their counselor and teacher well, because they're the ones that are writing their letters of recommendations for those schools. So the more the teachers and counselors know your child, the better that letter of recommendation can be. Speak about your child's qualities in the classroom and personally. So planning ahead for junior year. So as I said, they have until April 2nd to make any final course requests after their scheduling meeting in February. After that, it opens up again in June to make any course request changes. And then after June 23rd, they have that last week of August, first week of September to make those, any adjustments that you want to make pending what the schedule change window is in the program of studies, which they have access to now. It's on our academic website. Following scheduling policies and procedures, that's the schedule change windows. Complete summer assignments, so whether they take a AP honors or a class that has a summer assignment, it does say in the program of studies this class has a summer assignment. So you have to be mindful which classes have those assignments so they can complete it before the school year begins. Registering for the PSAT, that can happen end of August, start of September. Continue post-secondary exploration. So as juniors, there's a college fair you and your child can attend. There's junior parent night, which takes place typically in November, and financial aid night as well. So that goes over like FAFSA. And thank you. That's our Instagram page if you want to follow us. Now we'll have some counselors for some Q&A.
Okay, thank you. So I hope you guys are finding tonight's presentation helpful. We are now going to move to our question and answer portion, which is my favorite part of the night. I am joined up here by Ms. Kukuro, Ms. Meriview, and Ms. Cahill, who are here to help answer your questions. I do want to give a special shout out to Ms. Cahill, who not only is representing the counselor perspective, but she shares in your experience as a parent of a sophomore. So she knows exactly how you are feeling. So we are going to kindly ask that for tonight, your questions, we're going to focus on general questions that may benefit the entire group. If you have a more personal concern, we are happy to connect with you individually at a later time. So please don't hesitate to ask a question. Chances are someone else is wondering the same exact thing. So feel free to raise your hand. We will come around with the mic so that you can ask your question for the entire group. So who wants to kick us off? Okay. Okay. I'll go on this side.
Hi, I was just wondering, in terms of the test that you should ask your child to take, the SAT or the ACT, do you have any guidance as to like which way to direct them if they're stronger in one spot or more interested in something else? I'm just worried, don't want to force him to take too many tests.
So if they took the PSAT sophomore year, it's really for exposure. We wouldn't expect sophomores to prep for that test, but that test can also be a good indicator of when they might want to start prepping and testing for real. So I'm just going to speak more from my perspective. Your individual counselor might have a different perspective specific to your child. But when I see that a student as a sophomore has scored over 1,300 on the PSAT sophomore year but didn't prep, that indicates to me that it might be appropriate for them to do what I call an accelerated testing plan, where they might start doing their test prep over the summer between sophomore and junior year. That way, their testing window would be the first semester of their junior year, with the belief based on the statistics, the data, that they would hit their score. So ideally, you want to have about a 6-month testing window, and once you determine what the testing window is, you want to back it up about 3 months and start your prep then. So for students who I would say are at a 1,300 in the sophomore PSAT without any practice, they're also usually in the most accelerated classes getting the highest grades. So they're usually taking all honors and getting straight A's. So then junior year, they're looking at something similar. So that's just like a general profiler. And that's a very small population, by the way. That's actually less kids than you would think, although more students are doing that, even though it's not right for them. And so what they end up doing is they're extending their testing period and prep, and it can cost a lot of resources, both their time and energy, which can affect them emotionally, and your resources is your money. So starting sooner does not indicate you're going to get your score sooner, even if you feel like everyone else is doing it or you have the time in your schedule to do it. To me, it's really based on that PSAT score that was blind, as well as what their curriculum is, specifically math, and what their grades are. The more traditional route would be if you took the PSAT sophomore year, great for exposure. You would take it again junior year. That score is more of a predictor, right? But also keep in mind that the math level can matter. If you have a student who's in Algebra 2 as a junior, they've only seen 1 month of the curriculum when they take the PSAT junior year. So you would not expect their math score to be as high because they simply haven't learned the content. So in that scenario, if you started test prepping that summer, you're not really test prepping. You're actually tutoring in the content area that they're going to learn in the course of the year. So a traditional test prep, you take the PSAT in October of your junior year. Then we would suggest that you see the ACT. Whether you want to take a real ACT, you could. Whether you want to go to any of the testing companies and ask for a full-length practice ACT, because a diagnostic is abbreviated, and the abbreviation takes away the timing of the test, and that's one of the things that makes the ACT so different for the student experience in comparison to the SAT. So ideally, by December of junior year, you would have an idea of which tests they're better suited for, which tests the tutor believes that they can get the strengths based on what they've got wrong, where they can bring them the furthest, which tests the student feels more comfortable with, and then you're looking at usually starting your prep around this time next year with your testing beginning in the spring of your junior year. That's more the traditional path, but again, it is individual, so I'm speaking very broadly, and so you could always follow up with the counselor, but that's generally what I would be advising.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, we have a question over here. Great.
Just to follow up on that, so how many times do you recommend a student take the ACT or the SAT, and then does a college get to see all of those grades or scores?
Okay, so in terms of how many times do we recommend that a student take the test, so I think that it depends on what your goal is and how quickly you can reach that goal, right? It also may depend on whether you are a strong test taker or not a strong test taker. So some students may take one test and be done because they get a high enough score. Some students may take one test, realize that wow, this is really different from what my GPA looks like, and perhaps I'm not going to utilize standardized testing and actually choose not to take any further standardized testing. So those are two polar opposite types of students, right? And then in terms of statistically what most experts recommend, typically you do not see an increase after the third administration. So typically there's the biggest increase between the first and the second administration and a little bit smaller of an increase between the second and third. Now listen, that depends on your prep. If you go into the second administration with very little prep, then you might actually see the biggest jump between the second and the third. But assuming your preparation is adequate for the testing, you're not typically going to see much of a jump after that third test. But there's two different types of tests. So I mean, would we say you should take 6? No, to be honest, I mean, I wouldn't, but, you know, I think it really, you have to look at your students' strengths and weaknesses, their life, their schedule, figure out what makes the most amount of sense. And, you know, I think Ms. Moreau, you made a really good point when she talked about the idea of starting earlier doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be more successful in the process. It may mean that all you're doing is just sort of drawing the process out for yourself and making it actually more stressful. So I would say, you know, take a look at what the junior year PSAT score looks like. So for most students, that's what they're going to base, like, am I an SAT taker or no on, and then have a conversation between you and your child and then also the counselor about the idea of what makes the most amount of sense given what their goals are, what their life looks like. We do have some athletes that want to test a little earlier because they're looking to see if they can get a score so that they can, if they're going to use it, show it to coaches earlier on. So it really does depend on what your goals are, how frequently to take it. But again, if you're asking for that statistical question, it's typically no more than 3 times because you're not really going to see much of an increase.
Okay, great, thanks.
Can I just add one comment to that?
Yeah, sure.
So just in terms of the 3 times, if you're on the traditional test prep, which again is the majority of the students, that's what we would recommend. There are 3 SATs in the spring of junior year. If you hit 2 of those by June, then you have a super score opportunity. You have a good idea of, okay, what's my college list look like? Is my score competitive? Do I need to sit the 3rd time? The 3rd time at the end of August. That's also early enough for you to get the score back to decide if you're applying with test scores or not, given the early action deadlines, early decision deadlines of November 1st. If it's the ACT, you've got April and June. July is hard to get. So again, April and June, ACT gives you 2 looks. Same thing, make an informed decision. And then if you can't schedule for July, because it's not offered everywhere, you have September, which is the first weekend after Labor Day. All of that window is what most kids should be doing. And then that gives you 3 looks, which is what Ms. Cahill said, across 6 months with 4 test dates.
Okay, great. Thanks.
So if you send, so the SAT allows for super score within the College Board. So when the student logs into their College Board account, if they've taken the test 3 times and they enter in all the colleges they're going to send their scores to, it will, the College Board already filters this. The first school shows up, it'll say, we accept the super score, which means you can take the highest math and the highest reading regardless of when you sat for it. If that's the case, then when you look at the score report, they're going to star which dates we're going to send. So maybe you only have to send May and June, and you're not sending March at all. Some colleges say you have to send us all the scores. That policy will show up. If that's the case, they're going to see them all. And then the ACT, colleges do super score the ACT, not as many, it's not as widespread as the SAT, and there's also not a database that I know of, I don't know if you know one where we can send you so you can find out other than actually looking on each individual website. But the reality is the colleges don't have time to see what makes a student weak, so it's not so much how many times you took it and if they see a lower score when they're looking at all of the scores to get your highest, because they're really going for what's your highest score. They're not looking to see, oh, but you took it this one time and you didn't do well. Now, we wouldn't suggest you intentionally bomb a section, right? That would not fare well. But again, if you didn't do as well, they're looking at your application in 7 to 8 minutes. That's how much time is being given to an application. 7 to 8 minutes on the review. Yeah. And there's a good chance your admission officer is not even seeing the score because when they get the scores, someone else or the computer is pulling it into their file and they're just seeing what they're going to take.
Just to kind of add to that a little bit too, we didn't go into a lot of detail about this topic, but there also are lots of schools that are test optional, which don't require SATs or ACTs for admission. Again, we will cover that throughout your junior and senior year presentations, but just kind of putting it out there, there are many schools that are test optional for our students who might not be strong test takers. There's always lots of schools who don't require that. So, okay, I think we had a question here. Great.
In terms of the conversations between the student and the parent and the counselor on the test planning, the planning and timing for when to take the tests, when to start prepping for it, are those conversations that typically happen merely either student and parent or student and counselor or parent and counselor, or how do those conversations work?
So, I would say that it depends is the answer to that question. Some students come in with questions. They are just the type of kid that when they have a question, they will pop in and ask the question. As they become upperclassmen, that happens more frequently, right? They get used to us. They've seen us multiple times. They realize that we don't bite, and they can come in and ask questions, right? So sometimes it is that they pop in because they really want to know. Other times it is because a parent reaches out and starts talking about it, and then we're like, you know what? Like, why don't we call your kid down and we'll have a conversation with them, and then you guys can follow up at home, and if you have more questions, we'll be happy to chat. And sometimes it just happens by virtue of we're having conversations with them about post-secondary planning, and then they're like, oh, like, yeah, about testing. So sometimes it just comes up because we have, certain programming that we do each year. So Ms. Coviello mentioned that this year we focus a lot on careers, right? And the idea behind that is to start saying to them, depending upon what career you want to pursue, what trajectory you take, like in terms of your education, might have a little bit to do with that, right? So like if you want this particular career, you probably will have to go to a 4-year school versus a 2-year school versus a vocational program. So as we start to do that this year, sometimes that brings up questions about like, oh, is that something where I would need to have testing? So I think that, what I would say to you is if you know your child has questions or you have questions, encourage them to come down and ask, because it becomes a much more rich conversation when you're talking to the student about these things rather than sort of triangulating, like the questions are yours and then you kind of like send them, it's better if we just sort of talk directly to them, and then if you have follow-up, we're happy to talk with you about it. But I think making your student drive that process, and if they're not ready, that's also important, right? So I think you have to kind of meet them where they are. If they feel like, I'm not ready to talk about that yet, they're sophomores. As Ms. Muraview said, they're really probably not going to test, the majority of them, until the spring of their junior year. So if they kind of look at you like you have 8 heads when you mention it, back off a little bit and wait until it's closer to the time that they're really going to be doing this. They'll take that, junior year PSAT. It's a great idea to take that as practice, because again, you've completed now more course material that is relevant to your performance on the PSAT as you hit junior year. So sophomore year, it is really just exposure to what standardized testing looks like. Junior year, you're getting a little bit better of an idea of how they're gonna perform. So I would say, sort of let your student do a little bit of the driving, and then if you're getting to the point where it's midway through junior year and they haven't driven anything, then of course you can start to talk a little bit more about those questions.
Okay, great. More questions? Okay, we have a hand up here. Where? Anyone here? Oh, all the way up top.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So, sort of a follow-up question on the role of the parents, right? So, what is the best way? I mean, I totally agree with you 100% that our kids should be driving the conversations, right? They need to be taking control. But how do we validate some of what they think to be true? Because, I hear things from my child that I'm like, is that really what your counselor's saying? Or is that what you think? Or is that what other students are telling you is required? And it just doesn't seem right when I'll give you an example, pushing themselves in classes that maybe they shouldn't be in, but they feel that they need to, and they're telling us, but my counselor says I can't go backwards or I can't do this. And I can't imagine that you guys are telling these kids to take coursework that is harder than they're capable of doing. So what's the best way to interact with you guys without, becoming helicopter parents and like babying our children?
I can answer that for the 4 counselors who were in the auditorium, like our kids today. So we met with the sophomores, and I literally spoke on that topic I think like 10 times around, straightforward, back to it over and over again. So, I mean, I'm sure my colleagues gave the same message about challenge is not one size fits all. Not everyone is challenging themselves with honors and AP classes. I talked about the balance. I talked about stress. I talked about mental health. I've talked about when the transcript explodes because you took one too many classes. The teachers are advising. It's what they're advising and recommending. So I know we addressed that at length today in our meeting, and I'm sure my colleagues did as well. And that is definitely not the messaging. And I did say that sometimes students will come to us and say, I want to go to this school, right? And so how do I get there? But maybe that school's not a good fit. So I talked about that as well. We're going to find the school that fits your strengths and your interests, right? But you have to start with having honest conversations about where your limitations may be, as opposed to going to what extent to try to get to something. And then, I mean, I think we all have students that we can see and, are even probably working with right now as seniors who didn't adhere to that advice, and now the college outcomes are disappointing. But if they had just taken one class less, the transcript wouldn't look what it looked like, and then it would have been different. They were trying to achieve something that they weren't prepared for. And again, there are certain indicators that we're looking at, with experience that we know that. If you're pulling straight B's in all honors classes, probably thinking you're going to get straight A's in all honors and AP classes with 2 more academic electives is unlikely when you then also take into consideration your extracurriculars. So we're looking at that whole picture, and I think we're all very honest. We're not dream killers, but we're very honest. So I think as a department, I mean, my colleagues would jump in, like, that's our message. So if they're telling you we're saying something otherwise, I think the answer is probably not.
Yeah, I think, though, that you asked the $64,000 question about, like, how as parents do we deal with the idea of, like, is that a rumor? Is that a self-driven, like, I need to take this particular class? Is that coming from their peer group? I mean, good question. I work here, and I can't always answer that question for you. So, and I deal with I deal with exactly the same questions, and yet I'm wearing, like, both hats. So I completely sympathize. I would say, listen, none of us will ever say, don't reach out to us. Like, if you are like, what is happening for my kid? Why do they think they need to take, like, this magical, like, 2 honors classes or 2, like, I get these, like, magical numbers from kids, and I'm like, where'd that come from? They can't even answer that question. They cannot tell me where the number came from. It is in their mind, and they just have it there. So, I mean, first of all, the rumor mill is strong around here, and I say that to students all the time. I hear the weirdest stuff every year. I'll have a kid that comes in and they're like, so I heard that AP psychology is switching to be a science, and I'm like, say what? No, I mean, it's a social studies class. It's been a social studies class for the 18 years I've been in this building. No plans to make it anything other than what it is. But then I have kids who are like, oh, I heard that, colleges add 0.5 to our GPA because they know that we're a hard school. Cool, who told you that? I don't even know. Like, they don't even know who told them what. So I think the answer to your question is, if something sounds like, to you, feel free to reach out and be like, did you say this? Because I can 100% guarantee that almost all the time the answer is no. However, there may be messaging that they are hearing that I'm not saying we're not partially responsible for, in terms of, like, yes, the general rule is, like, take a competitive schedule, but one that makes sense for you. But they hear the word competitive, and their mind sometimes goes to something that equals something that we weren't talking about, right? Maybe they have this one friend in mind where they're like, well, she said competitive, so that kid's taken whatever, so then that must look like what competitive looks like. So I do think that it's okay to ask those questions of us. It's okay to push them and be like, where did you hear that information? It's incredibly hard. They get messaging that, I think comes from multiple places, and then they have a lot of self-imposed pressure. And you can be one of those people who's like, I don't even care what your grades are, just be a good person, which is what I say in my house every day. And then I didn't get an A. And you're like, oh, okay, so you didn't get an A. But you can't, it's not always coming from you, and it's not always coming from us. Sometimes it is really an internalized version of multiple messages that they compile into one thing.
I'll say too, I think sometimes like a message coming from us as counselors might sound different than coming from you as parents. I know this as a parent, like I can say the exact same thing as someone else and it just sounds different for some reason. So I think too, like as the adults in their life, we're validating their experience, right? Like there's perception and then there's reality and then there's like teenage perception and teenage reality, which is like a whole other thing. So I think like we can come at them and say like, no, that's not true, or that's not, okay, here's the statistics, or not everybody does that, but that's how they feel, right? They're a product of this community, which is very competitive. So I think like opening up that conversation and just letting them talk and letting them feel that, and then reaching out to us and just saying like, hey, listen, can you check in? Like they seem to be struggling with this idea of whatever it is. Now you have 1 kid or 2 kids or 3 kids. We've seen like in our careers like thousands of kids. So we can give you as the parent that information like, hey, listen, like that's actually not like really what we see. We see thousands of kids. This isn't really the experience. And then we can meet with the kid, and sometimes just that conversation and letting them talk and like validating where they're coming from and that it is really hard and they're all really nervous to some extent. They're trying to do the best they can. They're trying to keep up. And like we can certainly appreciate how that feels even as grown-ups. So I think as the adults in their life, we're working together, sometimes behind the scenes, but just collectively as like part of their team to get them through these years, which are really tough.
I don't want to belabor this question too much, but I do want to mention the fact that I think the other problem is you've got to be really careful about your messaging and the messaging that happens around them, because I hear a lot of words like, is that a good college? Or is that like a career where you will make enough money to support yourself? Like there is messaging out there within the community that makes it really hard for students to consider the idea of going to a particular place. Like what if nobody that I know has gone there? Like, is that the sticker that I want to put on my car? Like there is a lot of problematic messaging, and the words like good college I hear all the time. I've had people look at the diplomas on my wall, see that I was an attorney, and say, what in the world are you doing working as a counselor if you were an attorney? Well, okay, I mean, what you've just told your child is that working in education is not as important as being somebody's lawyer. So the problem is that there is messaging that you may not know you're giving that has an impact on those students. So it's something to really consider. And I think we all do it, and then you're like, oh God, like sometimes you have to backtrack because you do say something where you're like, I didn't mean good, I meant like right fit, and like, you know, just, but sometimes you have to be really careful about that because I do think it sends a message.
All right, next question.
My question's about Naviance. I'm my 3rd child using Naviance, and there's a lot of information that's there, but I still haven't figured out why the sign-in is different for parents and what information they see versus what we see.
I guess I could take that. So the different like access that you have as a parent than versus your child is, from what I can, off the top of my head, your child can sign up for the college visits that we have at Ridge High School. You cannot do that from the parent account. When they're seniors, we do things such as like matching their accounts to send transcripts to college. You cannot do that from the parent account. It has to be done from the student account. What am I missing?
Requesting transcripts.
Adding schools, requesting transcripts, that has to be done from the student portal, from their student access account.
So you can add schools as a parent. You can't delete a school from a child's list, but you can add a school. So
Right.
And the nice thing about using that parent account is when you add a school that maybe you want your child to check out, it will say like added by parent. The ones that we add say added by counselor. So like if you're keeping track of a list, it's nicer when you're looking at it like that, because then the kid isn't like, how did this school get here? Like I didn't put this here. So it's a way of kind of keeping things organized that they can take off schools, which makes sense, right? You're like, check this one out, and then they decide like, is it for me or is it not for me? They can delete it. In terms of the stuff they do senior year, it's super important that they have control over like which school is getting what documents, adding letters of recommendation from which teachers, so that they're making like concerted choices about, I want to send my English teacher's letter to this school. So the idea behind having the counselor account, the parent account, and the student account is that A, it gives them the most amount of control, which is what we want them to have in the process, and B, it means that they won't get mixed up about what things have been done, because you won't have the capacity to do certain things for them. They really need to know, like, I've done these things, these are the things I have left to do. So it's a way of kind of keeping organized and making sure that there aren't too many cooks in the kitchen.
Okay, thank you. Next question. I once read that after you ask somebody, are there any questions, you're supposed to wait 7 seconds. So I just counted to 10. So I'm still here. If anybody has any other questions, we are still here to answer any questions that are lingering. I hope, as you're sitting here, one of your main takeaways from tonight is that the Ridge Counseling Department, really loves working collaboratively with families. It's something that I think we're really proud of. So we encourage you, if you have questions, we understand it's hard to be a parent of a high school student. There's a lot of information. And so we ask you to please reach out to us. Let us help you. Encourage your student to come see us. We have future parent nights. We'll be together again in November of next year for our junior parent night, and then again senior parent night. And so there's a lot of support here for students and families as you navigate the rest of Ridge High School. So I hope your main takeaway is that we all are here to help. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us with any questions. Encourage your students to come see us. And that's it. Anything else you want to say? No? So again, thanks so much for coming out. We really appreciate it. We love all the support. And we hope to see you back again for the junior parent night in November. Great, thank you.